Good evening and welcome to the Cambridge Boston Hot Club. I'm your guest. I'm not your guest. I'm your host every first and third Wednesdays. Tonight, our guest is Stephanie Crease. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, David White has put out a graphic of her fine book called Rhythm Man. Came out last year. Chick Webb and the Beat That Changed America. Stephanie has written a book on Gil Evans and Duke Ellington, and most recently, Chick Webb. Stephanie will be joining us shortly. We've been listening to selections from a record called Crazy Clarinets and Raucous Reeds. The leader, Wilton Crawley, and the band is extraordinary that you just heard. Brad Allen on the trumpet, Louis Russell on piano, and many, many more. We'll be listening to a lot of Chick Webb this evening, and we'll talk lots to talk about, but we're going to begin with some of his compatriots at Savoy Ballroom. He was there for a decade, late 20s to late 30s, and before he performed there, the Savoy Bearcats and Fess Williams. When Fess went off to Chicago in the late 20s, Chick became the main thing there. Piece well known from Fletcher Henderson called Stampede was a big part of the Savoy Bearcats contingent. So we'll start with Stampede. First, Savoy Bearcats, and following that, famous Fletcher Henderson version with Coleman Hawkins.
hip dance, keeps your body moving, snake hip dance. Just keep on improving, bend your knees as you please. Chivalry in the breeze, snake hip dance. Good for rheumatism, snake hip dance. Such a funny rhythm, throw your hips out of place. With lots of style and grace, then you clap your hands. Rock like a ship at sea. Clap again. Beat through your hands at me. Snake hip dance. Keeps your body moving, snake hip dance. Just keep on improving, it's a rage from the stage. Call the snake hip dance.
Good evening again. I'm Bill Goldberg. You're listening to the Cambridge Hot Club. Tonight we're going to be listening to the music of the great drummer, band leader, extraordinary, Mr. Chick Webb. And I am honored to have with us tonight Stephanie Stein-Crease. If you look at David White's screen on the Hollywood Squares, the Cambridge Squares, you'll see the book. And thank you all for joining us. Before Stephanie comes, we're focusing on some of the bands that played at the Savoy Ballroom. And one of the greatest ballrooms of all time. Fess Williams was the house band prior to Chick Webb. So listen to a few tracks by him. We started off with the Bearcats, Savoy Bearcats, led by Leon Abbey, and he was doing Fletcher Henderson's Stampede. We listened to two versions of that, and then we listened to Snake Hip Dance by Wilton Crawley, who also played there. And there are a few clarinetists in the house. I wonder if they use that little slap tongue thing that Wilton had. Piano was Louis Russell and Red Allen. And we can come back to more Savoy Bearcats. Right now, we're going to listen to a few things from Fess Williams before our guest joins us. Fess was the leader of the house band prior to Chick Webb taking over. Fess got work in Chicago and left. So let's go to Make Me Know It, If You Mean.
Joe's Bar Room, right on the corner of the public square. And drinks were going around as usual, don't you know? Because there was a goodly crowd of us boys there. And standing right beside me, with his elbow right on the edge of the bar, stood my old friend Sam Jackson. You remember Sam? You know, he was the driver of the delivery car. And as he looked at all the people with his eyes of a bloodshot red, he turned to the bartender, and these were the words that he said. He said, I passed by the infirmary, and I saw my sweetheart there, and they had her stretched out on the table, poor child, so white, so pale, so bare. Soon there'll be 16 coal-black horses, all hitched to a rubber-tie hack. Then there'll be 7 gals going to the graveyard, but I'm afraid only 6 of them is coming back. Now, when I die, I just want you to bury me with a box-back coat and a high-roller hat. Put a $20 gold piece on my watch chain so the boys will know that I'm standing pat. And I want 6 pap shooters from a pallbearers and a chorus girl to sing me a red-hot song. Put a jazz band on and hit 'em a hearse. And let 'em raise sand as we roll along. And now, my good friends, as you've heard my story, Mr. Bartender, I'll take another shot of that booze. Now I guess I'll be on my way. I've got those gambler's blues.
two versions of Down Home Rag. First, Wilbur Sweatman. Wilbur Sweatman is one of the very first jazz musicians who was well known nationwide, mostly prior to the recording period. So we don't have a lot of recordings as he toured the U.S. from a lot in the teens and through the 1920s. Multi-instrumentalist, and everyone considers Rahsaan Roland Kirk the first person who played three reed instruments at the same time, and Wilbur Sweatman did that as well. Wilbur was born in 1882, passed in 1961. And we followed that with Chick Webb's version of the same song, and it featured Taft Jordan, Bobby Stark on the trumpets, trombones, Sandy Williams, and on the saxophones, Elmer Williams and Ted McRae on the tenor. We will be joined by Stephanie Crease momentarily, author of the great book, Rhythm Man, and we'll spend the rest of the evening listening to music by Chick Webb and talking about his life. He was born in 1905 in Baltimore, Maryland, and in his late teens he came to New York City and made his mark. We'll talk more about his history with Stephanie momentarily. Oh, Stephanie's here. I'll let her get situated. Welcome, Stephanie. So let's listen to Midnight in a Madhouse. And then we'll start talking to Stephanie.
Grab your coat and get your hat. Leave your worries on your doorstep. Just direct your feet, oh baby, to the sunny side of the street. Can't you hear the bitter bang and don't have it too. Life can be so sweet on the sunny side of the street, 'cause I used to walk in the shade on with those blues on parade. Oh, baby, and I'm not a rabbit at all. But if I never ever say I'll be returned, Rockefeller, with gold dust at my feet, oh baby, on the sunny side of the street.
Tune all of you know, but on vocals and trumpet, the great Taft Jordan, who spent many, many years as an integral part of the great Chick Webb Orchestra. And ditto Mr. Karp, as he mentions, underheard. Stephanie Crease is my guest tonight. Thank you so much for spending the evening with us.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Great. Thank you. Sorry, I had a little trouble logging in, and it's been kind of a crazy afternoon, but I'm thrilled to be here. It's really wonderful to be sort of in Boston with everyone. And we can later on talk about Chick's Boston, Southland, and all of that. So I'm very thrilled to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. What a fantastic book. And he spent a lot of time in Boston the last year of his life, though he was, as we mentioned about Wilbert Sweatman, was really one of the first jazz musicians who was traveling nationwide, prior to the early 20s. It was not very easy. Wasn't really easy for Chick Webb and his buses either.
It certainly wasn't, but no, it's interesting to think about. And we can talk about that when we kind of head up to the late 30s, when Chick is at Lavaggi's, and then of course at Southland, and and so forth. So I know you have I'm thrilled you read the book, and I would love, if some of your audience out there, I'd really love to encourage you to read the book if you can. There's a lot in it, so it would be very hard to pin it into a nutshell, much as I would love to.
Yeah, I had never heard of Lavaggi's, and I know a lot of the 1920s and 30s clubs around there. And that's one thing I'll point about the book. It is alive with the geography as well as the genius of Chick Webb.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I've been, it was kind of a long haul. It's a good thing that I started it before the pandemic, because I actually got a lot of hands-on research in various places earlier in my research. And then, between one thing or another, we were all very fortunate, and kind of have a place to go. And I actually kind of treated it as a writer's retreat, but I also got to talk to all kinds of people who might not have talked to me otherwise, because they were home, they had time, so that was also a little bit of, a positive thing. But as I said, I did research in Baltimore, made a few trips there, and took advantage, of course, the various research institutions in New York and wonderful libraries, the Performing Arts Library. I spent a lot of time at the Schomburg also, and just kind of, I think I mentioned to you on the phone the other day, this was very challenging project because, there wasn't a Chick Webb collection, except for a lot of you 78 collectors, which I'm not that, so it was more like, but in terms of papers or scrapbooks or notebooks, there really wasn't any of that. And I was lucky when I came upon, a few pieces of ephemera through a collector, and then also through just kind of digging into other people's collections. So that was a little bit of my circling the wagons technique of how am I going to do this, and I sort of did a lot of pre-doing that before totally committing myself to going forward with this.
Chick was born in Baltimore. And
Right.
are there archives available that you could go to during the pandemic?
Not in Baltimore, and there was no, there's not really a Chick Webb collection even in Baltimore. But something that is happening that's really exciting is, again, it's more of a legacy thing, which I do mention in the book, is there's a building, an institution, the Chick Webb Memorial Recreation Center in East Baltimore, which is in the neighborhood where Chick was raised. And it was one of his wishes, the last couple of years of his life, in conjunction with the guy who was his wonderful physician, a pioneering Black physician in Baltimore named Dr. Ralph J. Young. And they had wanted to start, kind of a rec center for the kids in East Baltimore, which was still, Baltimore was still, terribly segregated, and there wasn't a pool for them to go swimming in. There wasn't in that part of the city, a kind of Y or rec center or gym. So that was something Chick had actually started planning a benefit concert series before he died to kind of kick off the funding, but then he died. So in the early 1940s, Dr. Young carried this forward. And one of Chick's words to Dr. Young was, "You just call my friend Joe Louis, the great prize, champion boxer. He'll help you get a crowd. He'll fill any place in Baltimore." And it was one of these star-studded events. It really brought the Black and white citizenry and celebrities and show business people, and Ella came, and a lot of people from Chick's band did come, and Mom's Mabley came, a lot of dancers and a lot of local talent performed too, and they raised the seed money, and then the war happened. But after the war, the building opened in 1947, and right now it's being renovated, and part of the plan is, it's not a museum, but there will be kind of exhibition panels all over it, explaining Chick's story and other people who we interacted with, and that, which is fabulous. And apparently there's plans for sort of a founder's room, kind of a, informal recording studio that the kids could use, or any age people who use the rec center could use. And I think we're going to try to build into that other multimedia components, that can reflect Chick's life in images. And I have seen plans. I have no idea if they will happen, but just like fabulous murals of Chick around the outside of the building. So that would really be a wonderful thing. So
It's wonderful. Could you tell us a little bit about the neighborhood he grew up in Baltimore, and then maybe also talk about his early music experiences from family and his introduction to music, his first instruments and drums. And I guess one of the important things is to just focus on his greatness in his music and his also his generosity and brother and sisterhood to New York. And I will hopefully focus on that. But let's talk about East Baltimore and I guess the segregation there, and it's still a problem throughout the country, the sewage and the pollution, which, of course, I think, in my opinion, contribute to his spinal injuries, spinal disease.
well, Baltimore, Chick was born from city documents and so forth that I got. Chick was born in 1905, and the East Baltimore neighborhood was kind of, you wouldn't exactly say it was totally segregated. It was more of kind of a mixed working class neighborhood. There were also Jewish families. There was Italian immigrant families. There was even some Polish and German immigrant families. But around Chick's enclave, I would say it was largely Black. And it wasn't, one of the wealthier parts of the city, but it wasn't that far from downtown. But Baltimore in those years, like many other major American cities, there was a tuberculosis epidemic. And there was even a part of Baltimore, not quite East Baltimore, but other streets near the downtown, because there was, kind of terrible sanitation issues in those days, that it was called Lung Street, because so many people were getting sick. And Chick was afflicted with spinal tuberculosis as a child. And I honestly, was not able to get a hold of his hospital records, which is really, kind of a shame. But I, from reading different accounts, some material from the family, there was also anecdotally, he fell and hurt his spine. I really don't know about that, but we do know he did have spinal tuberculosis. And he did get treated as a child by Dr. Young. And whether, he was still an active child, but apparently, he was enrolled in school, but I don't really have school records that, attested to some of the other, like there were a couple of really great schools in Baltimore, that high schools, Frederick Douglass High School had an incredible music teacher that a lot of people whose names you have heard of by now, studied with, so he was like the legendary music teacher. So Chick didn't have that advantage, but I think he started learning on the streets, and he sold newspapers on the streets. And that was how he was able to earn money to get his first used drum set. And I think a lot of that happened early on. I think he grew up with a wonderful extended family that, people worked, they did, they had, I would say, not great jobs, just because of segregation and marginal economies. But he was raised by his mother, and he had two sisters, one older, Bessie and Mabel. And a huge figure in his life as a child was his step-grandfather, Clarence, who I think really encouraged his musicianship. And there are several quotes by Clarence saying how he'd tote Chick around when he was, first starting out playing drums at parties and at these clubs down on Pennsylvania Avenue. And also there were areas of East Baltimore that had some nightclubs, so that, Grandpa really helped out. And Grandpa really helped out. I mean, this was one of the things that charmed me, but it's also very important. A lot of my research came from just really plowing through historical Black newspapers, which over the past few years, there have been just troves of fabulous newspapers and other kinds of papers, and even community papers that have been digitized, so you can access them easily. So I spent a lot of time just almost call it like mining, there I go down the deep hole of ProQuest. And one of the things I found that was just so cool, because the great paper from Baltimore was actually a really important newspaper, the Baltimore Afro-American. And in the early, in around 1924, Chick's family would like show up in the society pages or church doings, because they were very active in the AME Waters Church, which was the church the family belonged to in the neighborhood. So there was a little tidbit that said, Mr. and Mrs. Clarence Jones, that was the step-grandfather, and their grandson, William Henry Webb, went to Harlem to visit with U.B. Blake. And I was like, what? And that was in 1924. So Chick indeed did know U.B. Blake. And, one of the things, again, that I sort of emphasized in the early chapters was Baltimore had a really active music scene, Black music scene, and white music scene too. And there were a lot of little dance bands, we're talking pre-jazz era, but just little dance bands, stage bands, before UB moved to New York right before World War I. And he had been, kind of a very prominent ragtime pianist in Baltimore, but also played in some theater bands before he started going on the road to Ashbury Park in New Jersey and making his way to, up to New York himself. And there were other people on the scene that was really, just kind of interesting little connections. The banjo player Elmer Snowden grew up in East Baltimore, and he played with UB sometimes. And he also left for New York with a little group that called themselves the Washingtonians, which was the band that Duke Ellington went to New York with, and when Elmer was still in it and still the leader. So, there's all that kind of stuff. And of course, Billie Holiday came later, but the Calloway family, Blanche Calloway, who I just enjoyed so much learning more about Blanche, and her younger brother. So, she kind of set a lot of stylistic things in store. She became a big cabaret star in Chicago when the Chicago club scene was just really happening. She made her first record with Louis Armstrong as an accompanist. So, there's all of that stuff that I tried to layer in, which was, both tantalizing and like, whoops, don't go too far off the beaten path here, but I'm doing that right now. So what else would you like to ask me?
Does anyone in the audience have any questions?
Quick thing, can you hear me? It's Willie.
Go ahead, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
You can turn your camera on too. You don't have to, but
I'll do it. Anyway, while it's coming up, my question was, you mentioned that one thing, I'm a big Chick Webb fan, and always thought it was amazingly ironic that the man who provided probably some of the best dancing music ever himself, I envision him as not being very mobile. Can you speak to how, you mentioned his grandfather toting him around. You don't mean like carrying him around, you mean taking him around in a car or something, right?
Well, certainly they didn't have a car, but, I think by the end of the night, I don't know, Clarence, I have also read a lot of, quotes by Clarence, and I think he was given to some hyperbole, but if Chick was really tired out after a gig, I can imagine Clarence helping carry him home and certainly carrying his drums home. But my impression, again, this is, I wasn't there. There's hardly any movie footage or video of Chick. There's a fabulous nightclub scene, which we'll talk about a little later in a first short soundy feature that Chick's band is the nightclub band. But anecdotally, the great Lindy Hop dancer, Norma Miller, said Chick was a fabulous dancer, but I don't think you would see him in person dancing very much. At the Savoy, the great arranger who did a lot of Chick's fabulous arrangements for Ella Fitzgerald, Van Alexander, he remembers Chick kind of, getting up and dancing with his wife in the mid to late 30s, Sally Webb sometimes. But he wasn't Lindy Hop. He certainly wasn't throwing people over his shoulder, but the truth is his health was compromised. But he was also always seated at the drum set, so it's not like you're going to see him around. And he was the band leader. He's like running the whole show. He's conducting from the band. So the other thing that I could never find was even like a little snippet of his voice on the radio. Maybe one will surface someday, just some announcer saying, "Hey, Chick, how's it going tonight?" Because maybe he's setting up his drums or he's busy with the band. So, he was not wheelchair bound. He did not use a cane. I think his health really started getting very severely compromised in the last couple of years of his life when the band was just working so incessantly. And that's when, I found, newspaper reports of, oh, he's in the hospital again. And he often went back to Johns Hopkins where Dr. Young could treat him, but he was very well known there. He was very well treated there, which is an interesting fact in itself. But it's not like he did not have health challenges, but somehow he certainly got around. He moved to New York, and he lived in a variety of apartments. His best friend and banjo guitar player moved with him to New York. So I'm sure in the early years, he had a lot of help, especially with people helping him move his drums around. And once he became kind of the big guy of the Savoy Ballroom, he had what they used to call a band boy, people helping him set up stuff. But he sounded like he was actually incredibly active. And if anything, being such a drummer is so physical, it may have actually helped him out, just helped him with his stamina, helped him with his cardio, and certainly he was a master percussionist. So, I just, that's one of the things that I really wish I could have known more, but I'm still in total awe. I hope that was helpful.
Absolutely. And did you run across, is there much footage? You say there's very little footage of him playing. What about at the Savoy Ballroom generally? Is there much?
There is archival footage at the Savoy Ballroom. I know there's a lot of that is actually at the New York Public Library, but I didn't, I kind of was, didn't dig up too much of that at the moment that I was doing the book. I know there's a lot of it there. And the Ernie Smith dance collection, Ernie Smith was a fabulous collector of jazz dance on film, and his whole collection is up at the Schomburg. So I did get to review a lot of that footage again, which didn't have Chick in it, but it was just kind of fabulous to see all these examples of dance. And there was definitely some footage there at the Savoy.
Cool.
I'm wondering if James McBride's novel that it's so successful this year has rekindled some interest in Chick Webb, because at the beginning of the book, as you know, he was an important name.
Yes, absolutely. I have to just tell you a funny anecdote. My book came out last April, almost a year ago. And I was so busy, first writing and researching and doing all this stuff. And I was so thrilled that the book was finally coming out, And then I had a really busy summer, a lot of really wonderful presentations last spring and book talks, including at the Harvard Bookstore with Judith Chick, the biographer of Becoming Ella, which is very cool. And then, but I finally had time to read other books. It's not like I wasn't reading the rest of the time, but sometimes I really couldn't read a whole novel. I'd read short stories or I'd read other little things for entertainment, but so much of my reading was taken up with reviewing this or going over that or going over proofs. So here comes August, and I finally oh, wow, I had some time off, and I love James McBride. I got his book. I'm reading this book, and yeah, the second chapter is just and the first chapter is really short. And if others of you haven't read this book yet, it takes place in this small town in Pennsylvania that's kind of, not totally in the boonies, but I mapped out was about an hour or so northwest, I think, of Philly, but definitely not urban. And it takes place in the 20s and 30s. And it's the scene is the Heaven and Earth grocery store and also a small town theater run by a guy named Moshe. So again, the theme of Blacks and Jews and the entertainment business and all of this, and the protagonist Moshe's wife happens to be a polio victim. So here comes Chick, and it's oh my God, he's on page 12 or something. And then he's really a presence in the novel. So I sent Bill in some introductory notes, and I had written a blog. I was so knocked out by seeing Chick Webb in fiction, and I really do hope it spurs more interest about Chick Webb, that I wrote a blog about it because I was so charmed and so entranced. And of course, I totally loved the book. So I hope you read his book. I hope you read my book, So, but it was astonishing. I was just, how could this even happen? Nobody's talking about Chick Webb, and all of a sudden James Bride's great new novel, there he is. So it's fabulous.
I hadn't thought about that till now. Go ahead, Arthur.
Oh, I just pointed out that it became a huge success.
Yeah, bestseller. So I wish I could ride on his coattails. Yes, biography. So
it's kind of striking when you think about it. And I think Eddie Karp and I chatted about this earlier tonight, was Duke Ellington, Count Basie, they're in 1 million novels, as well as, pop stars. Ella, they come up in TV shows, and it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
It's,
we can't help but wonder, what directions Chick might have had he kept living. But Bill, you want to play some music, and then
absolutely,
and then I will, after you're done, because I'm not sure we can do both at the same time. So if you want to play a track, then I would love to get on share screen and share some photos with you all.
Yeah, you can do that. The music will be, so they're separate. We'll just have to turn off the screen share to see our pretty faces. We can start with I guess Dog Bottom is one of his first recordings.
Yes, it was one of the first recordings that was released. It was recorded in 1929, and off the top of my head, I know Don Kirkpatrick was his pianist in those years. By then, he really early on, a lot of you may or may not know, yes, Chick Webb did work with the young Johnny Hodges back in, probably 26, 27, 28. But by the time of this recording, Hodges was with Duke, so he wasn't on the record. But the great tenor player, Elmer Williams, is on it. Of course, banjo guitarist John Trueheart is on it, Don Kirkpatrick. And I would really have to refer to my notes, but I won't do that right now. Why don't we just, it's a fabulous, let's just say this was Chick Webb and his Harlem Stompers. They were gigging a lot around Harlem at this point, but not, you can't begin to say they had steady work. They'd already played a couple of big band battles at the Savoy Ballroom and had some very plummy gigs. But this is one of their first released recordings, and it is, I would call it this is a stomp.
So on the record, it's called the Jungle Band, not
right. And the Jungle Band, I think, was one of these pseudonyms for, okay, we're not going to let you be yourselves, because for several reasons. I think Duke Ellington was then very hot. He was playing at the Cotton Club, and the jungle sound, even though Ellington, was so far removed from a jungle in most ways, in every way, even his band was they played jungle music. So I think the record company was also capitalizing on this was a trend. It was a trendy thing in Harlem, but it was also a way probably to protect themselves, get the guys on the cheap.
okay. So this is Dog Bottom.
Oh, baby, little I know. Got billy da do la da da do. Little billy a bob and do the do. Got big bob billy da 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 do. Bob billy da 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 little. Bob big bob ba da big diddy bob.
Stomping at the Savoy. Extraordinary.
Yeah, and
Kinds of
I-
songs that
let me-
you listen to this song. Never gets
and
old.
one of the I'm sorry, one of the things that James McBride really puts out there that's like, oh yeah, Chick Webb was a joy maker, and that he was, and that was, just one of the most amazing things about the spirit that he created. And I'll share the screen with you in a second, but it's like, to me, what was also so fascinating about writing this book, because it's like, I knew, sometimes you know things, but you don't really know them till you dig in there. He really moved to Harlem in the height of the Harlem Renaissance. He was running around with Duke when Duke wasn't quite Duke yet, and but all these other great band leaders and all these young, amazing musicians were, competing for gigs, and there was good work, some good work downtown, in these speakeasies and the big nightclubs like the Cinderella Club and Plantation Club and all these clubs in Harlem. But it's not like it was still really competitive. So for as many, Duke said in his own memoir, for as many guys that were out there blowing horns, there still just weren't that many jobs, So let me try to share the screen in a second. But then what we find, the Savoy Ballrooms opens in March of 1926, was the first thing of its kind in Harlem that was not a speakeasy, that was not an all-white elite club like the Cotton Club or some of the Black and Tans that were really expensive, actually. So this was meant for the people of Harlem. It was supposed to be the Roseland, the Arcadia Ballroom of Harlem, and it was as elegant and well furnished and immaculate and fabulous as anything anybody could ever wish for. So Chick's whole career was really intertwined with the opening of the Savoy Ballroom, and it's it claimed early on in its ads to be the world's most famous ballroom, and it certainly was. It was like you couldn't go to New York without going to the Savoy. So let me see if I can pull up some pictures. This might take me a second. Are you ready for me? Yeah.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me try to do this. Here I am. Okay. I don't know, share. Okay. It says you did that. Let me see. Why can't I do this? Did you make me? Oh, you have to make me.
Oh, the
a
co-host.
Yeah, sorry.
That's
All this stuff.
let me figure this out. My engineer may come in, may not.
Okay.
I can pull Roz. He might be able to make you co-host. Let's see. Well, I'll mention it, as I look through this, could you talk a little bit about everyone who worked at the Savoy was Black, and the owners were not, owners were
Right.
white Jews.
The Galuski family, Mogale, and meaning Mogale is the name that people might know if they know some of the Savoy history, but his father, Sigmund Galuski, and his mother actually helped put up the seed money because they were approached by this other white Jewish guy, who already had been successfely managing Roseland. He was also involved with the Arcadia. He was also early manager of the Rosemont Ballroom in Brooklyn, which was a big ballroom where Fess Williams' band first played before they were hired for the Savoy, and other things like that. And it was really, they opened it in 26, and one of Mogale and Fagan's first really smart moves was they really wanted it to be for the Harlem community, the Black residents of Harlem. So they found Charles Buchanan, whose family was actually from the West Indies, and he was the manager from early on. And I really detailed this a lot in the book. They really wanted it to be a safe place, not be associated with the speakeasies or hard liquor or bootleg liquor. They wanted women to be able to be comfortable there and not feel harassed. They had bouncers who apparently were legendary, that they would, Buck Clayton, I have a great quote I found from Buck Clayton, who played with Count Basie, and this was in the 30s. And he said those bouncers were something else because the ballroom was the Savoy took up half the block of between 140th and 141st Street on Lenox Avenue. And the downstairs were sort of storefront businesses, but the marquee took up about a third of the block. I'll show you in a second. And you had to climb up this beautiful staircase to get up to the ballroom. And he said, well, the bouncers didn't just throw you out once, they threw you out twice. First, they'd throw you out the door, then they'd throw you down the stairs if you were, really unseemly or drunk. And part of Sigmund Galuski's, Mogale's father, handled the legal stuff, and he did get a couple of lawsuits apparently by people who got hurt. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So let me find my my thing here. Oh gosh, I hope I can do this. Basic. Oh dear. This is going to take me a second. So it's not.
Any questions as Stephanie sets this up? I'll mention something. No one has questions that these you really get that feeling. These guys, these musicians were playing 5, 6, 7 shows a night sometimes. And you think of the extraordinary stamina they must have had
Right.
to do that.
Okay. I'm
My
hoping.
friend and engineer and about 80%, well, 50% of the brains in these broadcasts, Cliff Bodenweiser has joined us.
Okay, I'm not sure I can share the screen the way I want to. Let me see if this is working. Please let me know. Oh, yes. Can you see what's on my screen?
Just you.
Just me. All right.
Hi. Hey, Stephanie, this is Cliff. How are you?
Somehow,
Yeah, are you at the bottom? Are you getting the screen share, the green thing?
just a second.
Or
No.
Alt S.
Yeah, just a sec. Now I can't get to myself back to full screen. Oops. Okay. Hang on a second here. I am now Cliff, you're gonna have to help me out. Now I can't even find I can't get myself back onto full screen.
Okay.
I think I'll see you.
You can still see me, but I can't see the bottom buttons. Can you give me a hint here?
Are
Sorry,
you on a Mac or a PC?
I'm on a Mac. Okay, is that my issue?
No, it's not. It's just my issue.
Okay, okay.
It makes it a little more difficult for me because I'm not super Mac guy. But if there's any Mac people that can help out here, that'd be great if you could jump in, because I'm just not familiar with how the screen lays out. But it still should be the same in the Zoom meeting. And at the top right, the view is your key. I just don't know the key presses on a Mac to bring it back down.
Well, now I can't bring it back up. I'm not able to get to those buttons at the bottom.
Okay, so now if you move your cursor all the way to the bottom, they may just pop up. And you may be on super full screen right now. And that's the thing about Macs, they tend to stretch things out and take the entire screen up. So you either go with your cursor to the top or the bottom, and you should see some sort of controls. And
Yeah,
thank you.
I can see grid video, show thumbnail, no, show active speaker. No, that's not helping. Okay. I could try to send the file
Yeah,
to, who should I send it to?
just send it to Bill if you got him on your thing, and we'll see. I can control Bill's machine from here.
Okay. Should
Yeah.
I'll just send it as a PDF, Bill?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. And meanwhile, why don't you play another piece of music?
Okay, another.
Sounds good.
Or you can talk about Edgar Sampson. We heard Stompin', which is his piece. Don't Be That Way.
Here, actually, I would let me send this to you. Why don't you play one more tune, and then we'll get back to that. And I'm really sorry about all this tech fooling around.
Don't apologize. It's fine.
You call it tech foolery.
Tech foolery, yeah, really.
It's a great book.
There's Ross. Hey, Ross.
Hey, how are you, man?
Are you an Apple person?
Huh?
Or do you use Apple for screen share?
For screen share?
PC?
Yeah, we'll get the PDF over to Bill. That's easy enough to look at a PDF. Then no problem. Thank you, Ross.
Okay, it'll just take me a second. So
hi, Arthur. You can wave to me. I'm here. I'm really here.
I'm going to disappear while I do that.
Music.
Back to the music.
Mr. Paganini, please play my rhapsody. And if you cannot play it, won't you sing it? And if you can't sing it, you'll simply have to swing it. I said swing it, oh swing it, and don't ding it. Oh, Mr. Paganini, we breathlessly await your masterful baton, go on and sling it. And if you can't sling it, you'll simply have to swing it. I said swing it, and scatty-wah-wah, and what is scala? We've heard your repertoire, and at the final bar, we've greeted you with wild applause. But what a great ovation, your interpretation. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, Mr. Paganini, now don't you be a meanie. What have you up your sleeve? Go on and spring it. And if you can't spring it, you simply have to swing it. We've heard your repertoire, and at the final bar, we've greeted you with wild applause. But what a great ovation, your interpretation. Got la do la do la do lay. Oh, Mr. Paganini, now don't you be a meanie. What have you up your sleeve? Go on and spring it. And if you can't spring it, you simply have to swing it.
Ella Fitzgerald. Stephanie, we're still working on downloading. Why doesn't
Okay.
Apple and PC?
Okay.
And anyone whose mics are open, please mute. Got a few people.
Well, do you want to talk about Edgar Sampson while Cliff is
Yeah.
trying to set this up? And if we can't do the pictures, I really apologize. But you know, a lot of the pictures are in my book. Of course, there's images. You know, you just Google them. You know, there's a million beautiful ones. But I had some special things planned, so I'm really sorry about that. That didn't work out. Edgar Sampson. So I had a lot of fun also digging into the things about Edgar Sampson that I didn't really know, you know, which included that he grew up in New York. And when he was young, he also played violin, and he actually played violin on a couple of Fletcher Henderson records, I think. And he, early in his career, he played for, you know, kind of some community-based orchestras in Harlem at the very historic 135th Street Harlem YMCA, which was, you know, kind of a hotbed of social activity, musical activity of all kinds, you know, kind of classical concerts of, you know, people from the community, community orchestras, and events, for that speakers of all kinds, who spoke there. So it was kind of like a really cultural center of Harlem in those years. So Edgar came out of that, and I know he was kind of a young, talented multi-instrumentalist on the scene. And Chick, he started intersecting with Chick, I think, earlier than we joined the band, because I think Chick was already starting to play some of Edgar's tunes as early as 1932. And then I believe the first time I really see his name in the credits is when Chick and his orchestra, which by then had expanded to about 11 or 12 pieces back in 32, got to be the accompanying orchestra for Louis Armstrong's is back in the United States after his first tour of England, which was really kind of a big deal. And when he came back, he really didn't have a working band in New York. And his manager at that time, Jackie Collins, knew that Chick Webb had a band, and other associates of Armstrong just were booked, or just couldn't do it at the time. So Chick's band actually went on the road with the 1932 version of the Hot Chocolates Revue, which was the flashy review that Armstrong had been in 1929 and introduced, the great Fats Waller tune, Ain't Misbehaving, and other things. So this was really a huge coup for Webb. And at this point, again, I have to emphasize that Chick wasn't yet fully at the Savoy Ballroom. He'd gotten to play there a lot more often, a few weeks here, a few weeks there, but he also had some stints at Roseland downtown. He'd been kind of the house band at a kind of different kind of thing that was in the late 1920s, still a whites audience dance hall on 125th Street called Rose Dance Land, which was kind of capitalizing on Roseland, but was actually Rose Dance Land and nowhere near as fancy. So he had a lot of work, and he'd made his couple of recordings. And in 1929, he was, as I mentioned, which they thought would be a big deal, with the nightclub band in a short sound he called After Seven. And if people can manage to see this thing, it's on YouTube. It's kind of a wild little bit of film history, entertainment history, jazz dance on film. It has some of the first instances of the Lindy Hop being done by Shorty George Snowden and his partner, and a wonderful little dance contest. And that's the scene that Chick's in. So all in all, it's quite a little piece of history if you get a chance to look it up. So, but Edgar joined the band. He was part of Chick's band when they were working with Louis Armstrong, which was for a few weeks in November and December of 1932. And he was actually on the first recordings that Armstrong did for Victor. And those are wonderful recordings. I'm not sure I put them on this playlist, but that would be Hobo, You Can't Ride This Train, and That's My Home, and a couple of other things, which are just fabulous recordings. So.
We have Hobo. I have Hobo on my playlist. Let's play that as we
play that. Okay.
put the last touches on this.
My. Listen at that rhythm train, boy. Boy, I bet all them hobos are all set under them rods. E-Moley #1 and all them cats. Yeah, man. All aboard for Pittsburgh, Hattiesburg, all the boys. Oh boy, you can't ride this train. Oh, baby. hobo, you can ride this train. Now, boy, I'm the brakesman, and I'm a tough man. I ain't joking. You can ride this train. Hey, hobo, lift your hobo. Boy, you can ride this train. Yeah, man. Yeah. Now, hobo, hobo, you can ride this train. Boy, I ain't no blame. You can ride this train. Now listen here, boy. You ain't so bad after you all right with me, son. I think I will let you ride.
There we go. Thank you, Cliff. And what a great photograph.
Yeah, so thank you, Cliff, for getting this up here. And I finally have my control thing back, but it's better this way. I'll, let you know which slide. But this slide, I just adore this picture. It's from 1931, and I had found a few pictures that are from the late 20s, but at this point, it's like they're out of their spats. They're wearing beautiful tuxedos. They're dressed, they're all really fabulously dressed. And so some of the players at this point in the band, there's John Trueheart on guitar. That's still Don Kirkpatrick on the piano. There's Elmer James on the bass. And the saxophone section is to the right of Johnny Trueheart, is Russell Prokop and Elmer, I'm sorry, I'm getting it mixed up. I'm pretty sure this is the band with Russell Prokop, Elmer Williams, and Hilton Jefferson on alto. And the trumpet players, I would really have to, forgive me, but I'd have to look up their names. And I think that's Shelton Hill on trombone. So, but this is a great sounding band and not too different than the band that you hear on the recording that we just heard. So if you want to move on to the next slide, I think it has Elmer Sampson in it. Yes, I'm pretty sure. Oh, you can't quite see. It's a little cropped on the PDF. That's too bad. But this iteration of the band is 1933. You can't make it larger. I'm sorry. I guess yeah, it's different in the PDF. But to
Stephanie,
the very
while we're larger, can we talk a little? Can you give us a little tour of Chick's drum setup?
Yeah, in this setup, I mean, this was really an elaborate setup that he did not use all the time. So he's got a xylophone, he's got his suspended cymbals. The things in front of him are they're called Chinese toms, but they actually have like different woodblock sounding sounds. He's got a big hanging gong. He's got chimes behind him. And he does use all of these things, but he doesn't use them at all times. They're not always on the bandstand at the Savoy, certainly. They would be more for some of the theater gigs they did, like even at the Lafayette Theater he played in the Lafayette in the late 1920s and early 30s. But the most interesting thing about it is it's on a console, so he was early on, if you think of the big rock drummers of today, that's like what you would think of as an early rack, so it's really a phenomenal photo from that point of view. And Chick, I would also just like to iterate, we could consider him one of the first really modern thinking artists, drummers that I can think of. I mean, there were certainly other great drummers coming up in the 20s who accompanied, all the other great bands on the scene, like Sonny Greer, Kaiser Marshall with Fletcher Henderson, Ziggy Singleton, of course. But I think what Webb really brought to it was the propulsive, forward-moving swing beat that really propelled the swing era, and that he became such an artist at making himself, really, he drove the band from the drum set. There was not a conductor, it was all Chick Webb. And he was a fanatic about arrangements and arranging. So early on, he kind of helped build the band's book, before they were really hiring people or buying, kind of other arrangements, specials from people. Don Kirkpatrick did a lot of the early arranging, but once Edgar Sampson came into the band, he was the band's main arranger through his tenure for a few years through the mid-30s. And then they kept playing his work. There were other arrangers in the band too, but Elmer, I think, really helped craft what we think of as the big band sound of Chick Webb. And you really hear that in tunes like Let's Get Together, Stompin' at the Savoy, Don't Be That Way, and many others. So it's kind of fabulous.
There's something repeated in your great book over and over, is that his drums danced. Many people commented on that.
Oh, well, one of the great things that Duke Ellington had to say about Chick was a dancer drummer, and he did make the drums dance, and that was also what the dancers responded to. And I was really lucky enough to, interview myself, Norma Miller, one of the great Lindy Hopper's elite dancers, who became a professional at the Savoy Ballroom. And I had the fortune of interviewing her, before she passed away just a couple of years ago at almost 100 years old. I also had friends early on who were involved with the New York Swing Dance Society, and Frankie Manning was sort of a friend of our family. And I got to hear his stories and his interviews a lot, how all these different bands came through the Savoy, but Chick was the one the dancers loved the most, because he would just had a tempo that was just irresistible. You couldn't sit down to it. But for especially some of the elite dancers, meaning people who went flying around the room, if Cliff would like to advance the slides, you'll start seeing the photos from the Savoy. That's a picture of the Savoy at night. It's actually from the 50s by great Harlem photographer Austin Hanson. But you can see how it takes up the whole block, and it's glittery lights. It has all these sparkling, twinkly lights, and the marquee, you could see it from blocks away. And on this photo of the dancing on the upper right, that is Frankie Manning and his partner at that time, Ann Johnson. The other photo's a little blurred, the one on the left, so I can't really tell who those people are. But it's like they were like a young group of exhibition dancers that really were allowed to rehearse at the Savoy. Their work kind of started getting professionalized. They won the big Daily News contest, the Harvest Moon Ball, so all of that also went hand in hand with the fame of the Savoy, because the dancing also really put the Savoy on the map. This photo is from a little bit later. And from the, again, I'm sorry I couldn't show the pictures, but early photos of the Savoy, it has all different kind of decoration. In the mid-30s, it looked like this. It had this bent wood paneling. It was like an ocean liner. It was so sleek. And I know it seems highly improbable, but this young person at the very left corner front might be Ella when she's wearing this funny little hat she used to wear sometimes. So I couldn't vouch for that 100%, but it might be her. But that's Taft Jordan, trumpet player on the right, and Bobby Stark on the left. And you can just not quite see the other horn players. I think this picture was taken around 1936, 37. Oh, and this was a find. I got to be, it was sort of, so many people were digitizing a lot of their archives in the last few years. So the digital archivist at the Apollo Theater was really generous with giving me some of these flyers. This one was actually, I think, from around 1936 or 37. I would really have to go back to my notes. But Blanche Calloway is still on the scene with her own orchestra, so you can see in person the Scottsboro Boys, and there's an all-girl review, so it's a benefit. And Chick Webb will be coming up a couple of weeks later. And one thing I also want to just remind people about, if you didn't know, or tell you about in the first place, it's like this, the Savoy really was a rock for the community, both in its infancy and through the dark years of the Depression. It had almost weekly benefits for musicians' unemployment, other people's unemployment, benefits for children's hospital funds, summer camp funds, benefits for just about anything. And every night of the week, part of their strategy, they just wanted to keep their doors open. So other theaters around them, the Lafayette turned into, it stopped showing movies, it stopped having stage shows, but it also became a home for the federal, the Work Progress Organization, the Negro Theater Guild. So all kinds of other things were happening there, which were very, very fabulous. But the Savoy managed to stay open. So it would have every night would be free for somebody, and they had giveaways, food giveaways, record giveaways. And Chick was very much part of, all these many of the benefits that took place there. And even as early as 1932, there were Scottsboro Boys Defense Fund balls held at the Savoy Ballroom and other places too, and Webb's band and other top leaders like, Ellington's band, Cab's band would also take part in these benefits. So, I think Chick was, he was, people think, oh, he was so short, he was disabled, he had a hunchback, oh, poor Chick. But it's like, he was tough, and he was a great band leader. People really respected him, and he ran his band, he just really was ambitious for the band. And once Ella came into the band, it's like, I want to make it to the top, I'm going to get there, and I'm going to take all my band and Ella with me. So this photograph is particularly historic and incredible. I was so thrilled to, it was found, actually, it was in the Otto Hess collection at the Performing Arts Library in Midtown. And there is Ella with this gorgeous dress of hers and gardenias in her hair. This night happens to be the night that Chick Webb's band battled Benny Goodman's band at the Savoy Ballroom. And if you look closely off to the upper left, there's a beautiful lady who happens to be Gladys Hampton, and Hampton was there. The quartet actually played during the intermission. I found a photo of the quartet, but nobody ever actually talked about the Benny Goodman Quartet played as part of that night's event. You don't really hear about that. And unfortunately, this was not recorded. So we don't know what happened, except that according to Norma Miller and many of the other oral histories I went through, anybody who was there that night, that was a historic night. Chick made history that night, and there were, of course, this got polarized in the press because people were already calling Benny Goodman the king of swing, but to the folks at the Savoy Ballroom, Chick Webb was the king of swing. No nonsense. So, but I think who really won was the audience. And ditto when a few months later, the Savoy Ballroom presented another huge battle, epic battle between Chick's band and Count Basie's band. But something I did want to point out about this photograph, and I really, and myself, I love photographs. I really studied these photographs because sometimes I'd miss things and it would take me a while to see. So I'd see this photograph and it didn't occur to me until, months later that little black band at Chick's back is like, oh, he really has a backrest on his drum throne to help him, just stay sitting up all night. And he is also, unlike that photo we saw earlier with the chimes and the gongs and everything, where he's set up above the band, at the Savoy Ballroom, he was nestled right between the woodwinds and the brass. He's in the front row. He's right facing the audience. They are cracking, just right up nestled to him. And what other people said was every drummer in town or who was coming through town, white or black, would come to the Savoy Ballroom just to watch every Chick move, every move he made. So that's Chick Webb. You want to play another tune?
How about Midnight in a Madhouse?
That would be great.
Eliza. Incredible.
Yep. Liza is the ultimate masterpiece of Chick. I mean, there's others, but it's his total showpiece. And can you hear me okay? I'm getting a little feedback.
There was a little feedback, but it should be clear.
It's better now?
Yeah.
And Liza, you know, was a show tune by George Gershwin. So one of the other things I just want to remind people, if you don't know or impart, is, you know, Chick was open to all kinds of music. You know, I think, again, if he had lived longer, he would have drifted into bebop. You know, he played bombs, you know, but he played show tunes. He played Tin Pan Alley tunes. Sometimes his band would harken back to, they play a brilliant version of Darktown Strutter's Ball, which had been recorded by James Reese Europe's orchestra. You know, they played King Porter Stomp, Sugarfoot Stomp, all those stomps, you know. So he kind of went back and forth between the music of the 20s, the music of the 30s, and the music people like Edgar Sampson were writing for his band that, you know, then became huge anthems of the era. But Liza was a particular showpiece for him, and it's almost one of the fullest solos you hear of him on record, besides some of those radio broadcasts from Boston with My Wild Irish Rose and the other one that's so amazing, Stars and Stripes Forever, if you happen to have that. And, you know, because he plays everything, but you kind of feel like he doesn't just do fireworks. He does it all to musical effect. So this is where I just feel like this is how you hear Chick, not just the drummer band leader, but Chick as a real percussionist. He's playing all over the set, but everything he plays is musical. It's all arranged in his head. You know, he's got it all figured out. And he does, you know, kind of similar solos. I have, I think, 3 versions of this tune. And they're all, you know, every time I think, oh, I really like the other one, but they're all just completely brilliant. And the band just always rises to the level of his playing. So it's just kind of such a joy to hear him play that I never, ever, ever get tired of.
And he understood what every member, every section of his band was doing.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
whether it was the brass, the reeds.
Apparently, you know, he really had kind of what I would call a musical photographic memory, a musical photogenic memory, and was so involved in the arrangements, you know, because as a musician and as not just the drummer, but the way he heard the arrangements in his head. So he really shaped the band's dynamics. He led the band's dynamics on some of even the simpler tunes, you know, like Don't Be That Way. You really hear him like, oh, the dynamics are going to change over here. He's going to do a little bit something different over behind one soloist or another soloist, you know. And I feel like the Decca recordings are just such a shadow of what it must have been like to hear him in person. And that's why I really enjoy, we'll talk about them a little more, these Southland broadcast recordings that were, you know, just made a few weeks before he died. And you just think, how is this even possible? But I know you wanted me to talk a little more about John Trueheart, you know, so just at the height of the band's coming together, many fabulous personalities were in this band. So we have Mario Bauza, who became a major force in Afro-Cuban jazz, along with Dizzy Gillespie, who he met, by the way, at the Savoy Ballroom. Here, if you slow down a little, Cliff, maybe go back a slide or two, I'll talk about some of these. What's the one before this one? The slide before this? Okay, so the next one, that one, okay. So this is, you know, little snapshot collage on the upper right, of course, is Ella looking fabulously glamorous. You know, I think this was actually taken a couple of years after Chick died, when she's on her own as a band leader. On the upper left, that is Chick's band with Ella Fitzgerald. I think that's their first appearance in August of 38 at the, oh no, I'm wrong. That's their second appearance at the Paramount. You see the drum heads, the bass drum heads, those are two of Chick's most famous drum sets. So the one on the lower right, I believe that photo was actually at the Apollo Theater with Ella in this gorgeous white dress. Bardo Ali, who was kind of hired to be kind of the MC of the band, because that's the kind of thing Chick couldn't do. And Mo Gale actually had hired him back in 34, before Ella joined the band, kind of to be, you know, a little bit like what Cab Calloway was doing, to, you know, be theatrical and be funny and introduce everyone. And he was quite an asset to the band in several ways, and has an amazing backstory, which I go into in the book. But that drum set with sorry, Cliff, with Chick's smiling face on it, that was one of the first, you know, kind of among the first Gretsch Gladstone snare, but one of the fanciest sets that the Gretsch company, and it included the Gretsch Gladstone snare, which was a famous partnership snare drum, concocted for Chick. And again, you see he has a 28-inch bass drum. He's got everything in his fingertips, but it's also this fabulous embellished painted bass drum, which was kind of a custom in those years anyway. And other people talk about that. And that was the drawing itself was based on kind of a stylized cartoon of by this Dutch hot jazz lover who created other celebrity drawings. You've probably seen them, of Duke and Count Basie and Chick and other people too that made their way to the States. So then the other bass drum has this embellished crown, you know, and that drum set Chick started using, I believe, kind of later in 1938. And it was even more expensive than the first one. On the rest of his set, he has like sparkling green chicks, and there were chicks on the bands, you know, on the musicians' bandstands and all that. It's just quite a thing. But that's Ella, and that's Beverly Peer on bass. And in the bottom left, that's Chick with his wife, Sally Webb, who he started living with together in Harlem in sometime around the same, a little before Ella came into the scene, late 1934, 35. And she was, there's her story. Again, I'd rather you read it in the book because we're kind of running out of time, but she was completely devoted to him. And, you know, she really enjoyed being Chick Webb's wife. You know, she mingled with music publishers and all the celebrities that came to the Savoy. And she really, you know, when he became quite ill, you know, took really as great care of him as she possibly could. So you want to show the next slide? I'm not sure what I had there.
Jackson has a good point if you want to join in.
Okay.
But I guess also Sally Webb, how long did she live after Chick passed?
Actually, quite a long time. She lived, I would really have to look up the year, but I know she lived at least into the early 80s. She was a little bit younger than him. And she had a whole other life afterwards, which I would just encourage you to read the book, because it was quite a detective story, kind of ferreting out what happened to her.
You know, I know you quote Sandy Williams in the book. So it's from a WKCR interview. And actually is one of the first musicians I met when I was at KCR, which was a thrilling, but I don't know if Sally Webb was interviewed much in the 60s or so, or did she just start another life with another?
I don't think so. She kind of disappeared from the public world.
And while we talk about Trueheart, one of the most moving things that says so much about Chick Webb was when Trueheart was very ill.
Yes.
In the Harlem Hospital.
and he Chick, and he ended up going to a TB sanitarium in upstate New York, near Saranac Lake, where apparently there was a whole community of sanitariums, and very few places even there that would cater to, you know, Black patients. And Chick, really, Chick funded his time there. And I think some other members of the band helped with his healthcare as well. And it's again, part of it is, it's so heartbreaking. He's away from the band. I think he leaves. I honestly, I'd have to look it up, but he's gone. He's not at the Benny Goodman Chick Webb epic battle, so he's not in the band that year. I think he finally comes back into the band like the last few months of Chick's life, and then tragically he dies himself of tuberculosis in 1943, and he was at the sanitarium that was out on Staten Island. So it's quite a, you know, it is quite a story. And I think Chick really was generous. You know, some of these people in the band, Sandy Williams had been with him, and Taft Jordan had been with him almost from, you know, from the early 30s on. Even, you know, some people had been in and out of the band a little bit, like Garvin Bichelle, the great clarinetist and saxophonist, was with Chick's band a little bit in 1932, and then he comes back, you know, in 1938 and 39. And he has great things to say about Chick Webb in his own book and interviews he did that are just, you know, some really funny stories, but just how, you know, Chick just was so, I think one of the things that all of them emphasized, but Sandy Williams put so beautifully, is that Chick Webb was just all music all the time. He didn't have hobbies. He didn't do other things. He didn't go to the ball game. You know, he just, all he thought about was music, and he lived for it. And that was also the passion of that, and the drive of that, and the, we're going to get to the top no matter what, is all him. And I think his bands, his musicians just really loved that spirit in him. You know, sometimes even at their height of their fame, I don't think they made as much money as certainly not as much as the white bands, but even as, you know, some of the other real top ranking Black bands like Ellington's or Cab Calloway's. And I know Jackson has some questions. I know Jackson must be a drummer, because forgive me if I'm flubbing things here. It's been a long day, but I'm happy to, please ask away or give us your input.
Stephanie, you and I met at the Jazz Museum, and I rode back downtown with you on the subway.
Jackson! Oh my gosh, I've been meaning to write you again. I'm so sorry. It's been a crazy busy couple of weeks. Thank you for coming.
Yeah,
and thank
sure.
you for coming here.
I can't get enough of Chick Webb.
Well, there you go. So I will be in touch, you know, so forgive my.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to make some comments on you know, I heard you talk about that backrest at the museum also.
Yeah.
And I recognized it. I used to have a catalog from the Wahlberg and Auger company, and they made all of that drum equipment and that rolling rack that Chick uses with the Gladstone, the Gretsch Gladstone drums. That would have been one of their items also.
Amazing.
As well as those cymbal stands and the hi-hat and so forth. And over the years, I've had a lot of their stuff. They were still making things still into the 1970s. They went out of business in the 1970s, and everything was auctioned off. And I lived in Boston for a couple of years in the early 70s, and I went out to their, it was not the factory in Worcester. They moved to the neighboring town of Auburn at some point. And that's where the business finally ended. But I bought equipment from them out there and parts and stuff like that. And actually, there was Mr. Auger was still around, and I think Mr. Wahlberg was also, or descendants of the originals, because they go. This company went way back, probably into the teens.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
Well, that's they made a hi-hat that was very, very popular with most professional drummers. It looked very flimsy, but it had the best feel to it.
Amazing.
And that was being used up into the 70s when other companies finally made something that was a little better. But they made the equipment for all of the drum companies, even if it might have said Gretsch on it, on the piece of equipment. But that equipment was actually made by Wahlberg and Auger.
Wow, thank you.
Ludwig, same thing. Their hi-hat stands, all of the cymbal stands that they made, they might have had their own designs for them, but they were made by Wahlberg and Auger because they had the equipment to make them. Well, anyways.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. No, that's great. That's great to know, and I'll look into that more myself. And also, of course, the Zildjian company, the cymbal company, the great cymbal company, and there's a wonderful photo of Chick Webb with the Zildjian cymbal, when he was probably visiting Boston.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't have I want to touch on a few more things, but I really, unlike some of Bill's other fabulous guests, I can't talk all night. I'm still really recovering from this terrible cold, so forgive me. But I really want to talk about Boston, and I want to talk about this photograph here. And again, in Chick's last year, this photograph was taken at the Randall's Island Carnival of Swing, which is in May of 1938. It was one of, I believe, the first huge outdoor swing festivals. It took place on Randall's Island, which at that time was mostly park, and they built a new racetrack out there. So the stands for the audience were all, kind of like around a racetrack. And then this bandstand was set up. The whole thing was, as Lauren Schoenberg had said, it was a big multimedia event. It was sponsored by WNEW, Make Believe Ballroom. Again, the sad part was there's no audio recordings of this, but I believe there's a little bit of a video recording of Count Basie's band, which ended up in a newsreel or something, but I don't have that. But there's a treasure trove of photographs at the New York Public Library in the Otto Hess collection, because Otto Hess, who was a German emigre photographer who came in the 30s and then took thousands and thousands of photos of all kinds of great jazz musicians, opera musicians, other musicians. And so this festival, he's got tons of photos, and this is just, I love this photo of Chick, and it's kind of like, you can't quite tell, what is he thinking? Is he doing okay? But who cares? You really catch the whole band, the crowd. I think a lot of the people in the back are there, like the news crew, So it was a really great day. Many named, almost all the name bands you could think of were there that day. And some, also by this point in New York City, there really were a lot of opportunities for both black and white bands to either be in the scène venue, if not some musicians to share the stage. So that was certainly happening in New York City by the mid to late 30s, which was kind of a fabulous thing. And Chick was really, and I really want to say, he just interacted with every important band leader, every important soloist, every important person on the scene, and he was one of them, so we can't think of him. That's why, to me, it drove me to write this book. It's like, how could somebody who was that prominent of a figure in all those circles just kind of ebb away, in addition to that, he just died so young. So I'm so happy everybody's back and interested in talking about Chick Webb and listening to Chick Webb, because the music is just a joy forever.
Very, very true. And you know, when you read Stephanie's book, I felt like, I mean, everyone was talking from their heart, whether it was Joe Jones or Duke Ellington. There were 100% kind bones in his body, unless you edited out some of the, but as you said, I guess it was all music.
Well, I want to say he was, it sounded to me from what some of the sidemen said, it wasn't like, and Norma Miller, who had a lot to say about all kinds of people on the scene, but it's like he wasn't like the goody Mr. Chick Webb. He knew he was a big shot, and he thought of himself as one. And he'd pull himself up by his suspenders, or get his all full 4 feet of him, kind of don't mess with me character, and would just tout his band to the heavens, that he wanted the best for them, and he was going to work as hard as he could. And he was really, I would say, not draconian about the way he ran the band, but he was a disciplined band leader. They rehearsed. He was a real stickler for rehearsals. And again, as you pointed out earlier, he really knew the music. And I've heard several sidemen interviews say that if he heard you playing a wrong note, he would correct your note by singing it back to you. If he loved your solo, he would sing it back to you, that kind of thing. So he was just totally nonstop that way. And, the most tragic part, as Ella and the band became more and more famous with their succession of hits, which, kind of the ultimate was a Tisket a Tasket. The more famous they got, the more they toured. And that's when his health problems really started kicking in, the last 2 years of his life. So it's just amazing that he really, one of their hit songs was If Dreams Come True. And I think he really wanted his dreams to come true for him and Ella and the band. So I'd like, I just have like to kind of wrap this up in the next 10, 15 minutes, but let's go to Boston. So one of the things that happened, Chick and Ella, and even before Ella joined the band, Ella finally got hired. Again, I won't go all into it now. She finally got hired in the spring of 1935. She did a tryout at Yale University at a prom weekend, and then if Chick said, well, if she got over there, he'd let her try out at the Savoy for a couple of weeks. And so she did, and that was it. So starting from the spring of 35, they were already having some recording sessions. They went on some small tours that summer, and, and things, she just came into her own, because in a way she kind of had carte blanche to develop her own style of singing with one of the world's greatest swing band at the time that Chick was at the height of his powers as a band leader to develop its sound. So it's like just this almost fabulous collaborative story of music and Ella. Ella's developing, the band is at its peak, everything's happening. And also he already has the radio connections. Mo Gale had gotten him a lot of contracts with NBC, had syndicates all over the country. So you really could hear his band all over the country. If you look at radio logs, it's kind of incredible. So as things went along, in early 1938, they got a gig at a club in Boston, which was called Lavaggi's Grill. Now, Bill says he doesn't, this was before his time. He doesn't remember it. I lived in Boston for a while too. I never heard of it, but it was kind of a sweet, I think my impression was before Chick came along, they had kind of sweet bands there that the college bands like to go. And it was kind of a nightclub. and you could go there and dance and have dinner and so forth. But they were one of the first Black bands to perform there. And it was unusual, it was just highly unusual for them to even get hired. But Labadie, apparently took a chance on them, and they were an instant hit. And there were also broadcasts from the club, and they were such a hit that he held them over, I think for almost a couple of months. And it was during this period that Ella, who was a singer, but also, she was really interested in, we need a really big hit record. They'd been doing pretty well, but it's like they wanted a super hit record. So she was fooling around at the piano, and apparently during some downtime, and came up with this idea for a Tisket a Tasket. And apparently Van Alexander, she was after him, you've got to write an arrangement of this, I think this will be great, people will love it. So he did, and they really kind of brought it to attention at the club, and it was a big hit. People asked for it, started asking for it every night. And one of the big music publishers that worked with Chick, Jack Robbins, he one of his people heard it on the radio in Boston and were like, we got to record this, we got to get this song, it's everybody loves it, but by the time they took it to the studio in May of '38, Jack Kapp, the record producer, was dubious. Mo Gale was dubious. Everybody was dubious except Chick Webb and Ella, of course. So they went ahead. Chick insisted they go ahead with it, and lo and behold, it became the hit that it became. And I have to say, in my earlier years of falling in love with jazz, I just I listened to other parts of Ella, but I never, I just thought, oh, it was too cutesy, it was too novelty, but I so got over that when I was writing this book. I just felt like the more I listened to it, the more I heard in it. It was like, there's rock and roll, there's shuffle, there's boogie woogie, there's call and response. Ella's just making things up on the fly. It's just fabulous. So I would like us to hear, let's Ella singing a Tisket a Tasket.
Great. I'll also point out, then I'll let you go. Before I thank you profuse. It was interesting in your book, Al Feldman seemed not to want to arrange it.
Right.
Completely ignored it. And Ella told him, I want you 24 hours you have, because he was missing all his deadlines for the arrangements. And Al Feldman became Van Alexander, who lived to 100 years old. So all of you know many of his jingles that he did in Hollywood. But anyone who wants to say something? I mean, again, Stephanie, thank you so much. Beautiful presentation and extraordinary book. So in the chat is a link to get the book. I'm telling you, it's a page turner. And wonderful. And also, we didn't talk about it, but I think anyone who's lived in New York or spent a lot of time there, whether you're Midtown person or in Harlem, between 125th and 145th Street, you just are there in your book.
Oh, well, I did a lot of walking around while I was writing this book, and it's what's incredible is how many places are still intact. A lot of places are gone, but I walked, I sort of did my own Chick Webb tour of Harlem, kind of looked up addresses of where he lived and other musicians lived, and where some of the basement clubs, still are. And it's a beautiful thing to do, so thank you for that. So I'd love to play this, and also, to kind of close out. Do you have the Southland, some of the Southland tracks?
I have my Wild Irish Rose, but it's a short piece.
Okay, well, let's hear it.
Tisket a Tasket.
Okay, and this photo at the end, this is Chick's funeral. It was like a state funeral. That is the church that I mentioned earlier, the AME Waters in East Baltimore. That was his neighborhood church. And that is the day of his funeral. You see people climbed on the rooftops, they're blocking the cortege and limousines of famous people coming from New York to the funeral. It was quite an extraordinary event. I had the great fortune to talk to a woman who was able to go as a child because her uncle was, kind of friends with some of the other funeral directors in town, and they all had to cooperate together to get enough flowers and get enough limousines and get enough everything. And people literally, you can see one guy hanging over the culvert on the building. It was something, and they followed the cortege out of town. And so I hope you read up on it. It's a heartbreaking event, but he got a funeral, as befits the Savoy King. So let's hear a Tisket a Tasket, and if possible, let's hear, and I'll just say one more thing, My Wild Irish Rose. Chick got to go back to Lavage's in 1939 for a bit, and he also was at the Southland Cafe, which was in downtown Boston, and all kinds of name bands played there. And he was probably supposed to play there 1 week, but he played kind of almost long weekends over the period of 4 or 5 weeks. And in between, he was going back to the Savoy, they were back at the Apollo. I mean, their pace was just unbelievable. But the broadcasts from Southland in Boston are some of the last recordings you hear of Chick Webb. And they're totally magnificent. And you can really hear the crowd kind of roaring in the background, and the bandstand, the other musicians going, go Chick, go Chick. So I hope we can play that. So let's kind of end this session. And I really thank you all for coming on this trip with me through Rhythm Man. Let's try to hear a Tisket a Tasket. And from Southland, if you have My Wild Irish Rose, or, that would be awesome.
Great. Thank you so much. I have a version of Wild Irish Rose, and I think I might know where the vinyl is of it, since it's not fortunately on streaming, but thank you so much. Let's see. Yep, a Tisket a Tasket.
A tisket, a tasket, a brown and yellow basket. I send a letter to my mommy. On the way I dropped it, I dropped it, I dropped it. Yes, on the way I dropped it. A little girlie picked it up and put it in her pocket. She was trucking on down the avenue, but not a single thing to do. She went pecking all around. When she spied it on the ground, she took it, my little yellow basket. And if she doesn't bring it back, I think that I will die. A tisket, a tasket, I lost my yellow basket. And if that girlie don't return it, don't know what I'll do. Oh dear, I wonder where my basket can be. Oh gee, I wish that little girl I could see. Oh, why was I so careless with that basket of mine? biscuit, a tasket. I lost my yellow basket. Won't someone help me find my basket and make me happy again, again? Was it green? No, 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 no. Was it red? No, 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 no. Was it blue? No, 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 no. Just a little yellow basket. A little yellow basket.
Coming up, my Wild Irish Rose, featuring Chick Webb at the drums.
Oh, magnificent.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's another masterpiece to go out on. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us. What a treat, what a pleasure. And again, order your book now, or even better, go to your local bookstore and they should have it. I was in some strange little towns that had university towns last year, and they had so many classics. It was before your book came out, but of just great books by non-Penguin Random books and all the monopolies.
And one other person I know who many of you know, so he's not here, but I'm thanking him also, of course, is Matthew Rivera, who let me enjoy some listening sessions of his 78s of Chick and Ella in his fabulous home studio in the course of doing that. So this was a huge trip. Somebody in the chat mentioned Cafe Bohemia, and again, Matthew I know is dear to many folks here. So I want to thank him too. So,
You know, when you mentioned Randall Island, I know you did a show with Lauren Schoenberg recently,
at the Jazz Museum in Harlem.
and Lauren dug up some, both Prez and Coleman Hawkins, from those concerts. So I don't know if I'm sure he would have mentioned it to you if there was Chick Webb available, but
Oh yeah, he would have mentioned it. I'll ask him about whatever other audio he found. I might have forgotten to really ask him more. I know there was no Chick. He
Yeah.
would have told me.
he would have told you a Chick, but because his actually it's part of his Savary collection,
Yeah.
which I think there are 4 volumes so far, and
yeah, it's fabulous.
Yeah.
It is.
there's a million great Stardust by the giants of tenors like Coleman Hawkins, but that one.
Well, I am actually going to have to say goodnight. So again, I really want to thank you so much for having me, and I'll be happy to come back. Or
You are welcome to.
I can talk about other stuff.
You can talk about Gil Evans, because I've got I
love to do that.
Yeah,
I would love to do that. So thank you all. I'm going to leave the meeting. So if you're going to carry on and play more Chick Webb all night, well, have a great time.
we will.
Thank you so much. All right, bye, Bill.
Bye-bye. Thank you. We'll listen to some more Chick Webb. I can take requests, but Margot Cooper just came on, and I can advertise my next show. Margot Cooper is my guest in 2 weeks, and this is her beautiful book called Deep Inside the Blues. And I was just going to email you, Margot, because I think you're going to have to come to my house to help me set up the screen share. We were going to, so this is Margot. Welcome to the club.
So we might have to find somebody else.
There's a guy down the road from David White named Cliff Bodenweiser. So I've worked with him for decades. So. And he's had a rough day, a rough 3 days, and here he is. Maybe this is a break for you.
So it's been a rough 3 days. Not in my usual lair, and but appreciate the show tonight, and Stephanie and all of her amazing stories and information. Wow, just that blew my mind. But thank you, Bill, for doing this and hanging in there without me. I was at the hospital bringing somebody home and all that. So it's all working out okay. And thank you, Bill, for being there for me this week as well. So
you're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Cliff, as always. And Margot, shall I introduce your book, or?
Oh, please go ahead. You're welcome to.
Margot is an attorney in Boston and
New Hampshire.
Hobby. What?
In New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. Well, it's New England. In New Hampshire, and very passionate lover of blues music, and she has been traveling in Mississippi for 3 decades now, continues to go there, and has met some of the most wonderful musicians, and many of them, migrated to Chicago. Some even came up to Boston and New Hampshire. It has been a wonderful advocate for them, and also celebrating their lives. And she's just.
The book, I guess what I can say is, the book is a combination of oral histories and my photographs. I started photographing around Boston, Cambridge, Alston, Somerville, New Hampshire, and started off in 1993, following the blues musicians in the local clubs. And in 1997, that led me to take my first trip to Mississippi, where I've been going ever since, several times a year. So the book features a couple of the men who played with Muddy Waters, Willie Big Eye Smith, and Luther Guitar Jr. Johnson, and Calvin Fuzz Jones. And then there's a number of many musicians from the Delta that I've covered. Everybody from Sam Carr, whose father was Robert Nighthawk, Robert Bilbo Walker, Super Chicken, James Super Chicken Johnson, who's still alive, and Cadillac John, who's turning 97 next month. And then we go down to Greenville and Leland, and where I covered, wrote stories on T Model Ford and Eddie Cusick. And then we've got a section on Other Turner and his family, who carry on the fife and drum tradition. And then hill country musicians from Cedric Burnside, grandson of R.L. Burnside, and Kenny Brown, who played with R.L., and Joe Ayers, little Joe Ayers. Yeah, lots of music to cover.
Thank you so much. Yeah, look forward to it 2 weeks from now. And Margot will join me in this little home studio. So, any questions from anybody? Comments? And oh, Margot, what do you want to hear? It can be blues, or it could be Chick Webb. I opened the show while I was waiting for Stephanie with pre-Chick Webb Savoy music.
Well, I think since tonight's the show this evening is about Chick, I think that you probably want to end with him. And for anybody, I hope everybody who's here tonight will want to hear some great blues music and join us on April 3rd. So I'll leave the choice to, the selection to you.
Okay.
You're the expert.
Well, we began the show with 3 musicians who were around in the mid-20s before Chick came to New York. Gus Williams. And so let's listen to something that connects. Fess is from Kentucky, I believe. And I don't have any photos of him, but he wore a tuxedo and he had a big top hat. And since we're talking about Mississippi in the Southeast, we will do his piece called Alligator Crawl and Dixie Stomp. That was Snag Nasty. Before that, Dixie. And before that, Alligator Crawl. All from Fess Williams, as is mentioned. He was the MC, and quite a character too, in Stephanie's books. Good stuff on her. And as I said, you've met Margot Cooper, my next guest, and she'll be here in 14 days in the studio too. And we're going to close out the program tonight with another important figure from the Savoy Ballroom. They're even called the Savoy Bearcats. And we're going to listen to two pieces or more. The first one, no one's going to have this tonight because you've heard very joyous and happy music. And Savoy Bearcats, this is their song, Nightmare. And we'll follow that with Hot Notes. This music that we're about to listen to is just under 100 years old. Incredible. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. And so hats off again to Mr. Bodenweiser, who had, I shouldn't laugh, 72 hours, but I think we've all been through those days when people close to us get sick. So Cliff is well, and his friend too's going to be fine. So, all right, have a good night and a good 2 weeks, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Again, this is the Bearcats, and it's called Nightmare. Well, again, thank you to everybody. A great pleasure to spend the night with you, the evening with you. And I'll see you the first Wednesday in April. Keep listening. Tune in. Good night, all.